Hello everyone and welcome back to another edition of the Money Pros. I'm Oliver Tutt, Certified Financial Planner Practitioner. I'll be your host for the next half hour as we talk about all the issues related to your money, how to make it, how to keep it, and hopefully how to help it grow. Let me give you an idea of what we have in store for today's show. First up, we're going to be talking about the cheery topic of IRS audits. More specifically, what you might do to get yourself in trouble, what the IRS is looking for since you filed your tax return on April 15th. It gives you a little things to think about to generate a little anxiety for you. So we're going to talk about that in the first segment. Second segment, we're going to be joined by our real estate pros, none other than Chad Kritzas, along with Sam Alpern from Keller Williams Realty. And we're going to be talking about the perils of for sale by owner, or as I like to call it, FSBO. I've always liked that acronym, so I'm going to stick with that. But we're going to go through some of the things you need to keep in mind if that's a sales approach that you're thinking about with your own property. And our third segment, something we've talked about many times here on the Money Pros. It's almost an annual segment that I look forward to. And that's talking about the best places to retire internationally. If you do, in fact, get audited by the IRS and you want to move overseas, I have a list of places for you to go that are noted as great places to retire. It's an index created by International Living Magazine. They update it every year, so we're going to have the 2018 results if you ever dream about leaving our borders for greener pastures somewhere else when you retire. And then finally, we have a question on CD rates at the end of the show, so we're going to get to all that. But let's leap right in to the topic of IRS audits and what it is that people do to get themselves in trouble. What generates an IRS audit? So here's some things to consider. Most people file their tax return on or before April 15th, personal tax return. You may have gone on an extension, in which case they don't have your return yet, and you don't have to worry about this right this second. The IRS doesn't disclose the methodology that they use to figure out exactly who they're going to audit. Obviously, that's not something they want to publicize. If they publicized it, it would be a lot easier to avoid becoming audited. The presumption is you do it by the book, although the book can be sometimes hard to follow, so it's not always about fraud. Sometimes it's just about mistakes. But we can glean from experts who follow this stuff, CPAs and attorneys that represent clients that do tax returns and see people audited, what things tend to generate audits. And we can also talk to former IRS officials, and sometimes they reveal information. So some things you should know. They're looking to recoup more than the expenses of the audit. So consider that fact. Obviously, the degree to which they think they are going to recoup taxes that were otherwise not paid is a fundamental calculus about what they're looking for. They're looking very specifically to recover money, and it costs them money to do an audit. So they want to get back more than what they put into it. Those with higher incomes are absolutely more likely to be audited. In fact, the audit rate for those with incomes greater than $10 million was 14.52% in 2016. So you had a 1.5 chance out of 10 that you were going to get audited with an income north of $10 million. Now, I'm guessing not many people listening to the Money Pros have incomes that high, but it illustrates the point that the more you make, the more likely you are to get audited. The total number of audits has actually fallen in the past several years, and that is because of budget cuts, but that means that the IRS is even more intent on seeking those tax returns where they get the biggest bang for their buck in terms of recouped tax dollars that were not otherwise paid. So the selection process is a combination of automated process and human factors. So the IRS compares your return to statistical norms for people in your income category, the area that you work in, what your career level is, and things like that. And the computer will spit out suspicious returns. But those returns are then reviewed by as many as 3 different layers of IRS agents before a determination of an audit is made. So let's take a look at a slide and we'll talk about some things that could particularly trigger an audit. First one is excessive deductions. Now this can apply on personal returns. This can apply to self-employed people. This can apply in a lot of different circumstances. But the IRS knows how much generally in deductions for charitable and other things people are going to be taking based on various income levels. The more that your deductions fall outside of that range, the more likely you are to get audited. Next, certain large business deductions. If you're taking large deductions for travel, meals, things that are hard to substantiate, the IRS is going to be that much more curious. Third one we have here, audits of related returns. If you have a business partner and your business partner is audited and the IRS finds suspicious stuff with your business partner, it increases the likelihood that you might be audited. So if they've audited a related party and found some kind of problem, raises your chance of getting audited. And finally, excess rental losses. A lot of people listening probably have rental property. Rental property can generate tax losses that are beneficial on a return. If those losses seem way out of line with the property that we're talking about that you're filing on your tax return, you can consider yourself at higher risk of an audit. So those are some of the things to consider. And of course, if you are audited, you're going to want to talk to a professional. You should not represent yourself before the IRS. So talk to a CPA, an attorney, or an enrolled agent. All right, up next, we're going to be talking real estate with the folks from Keller Williams. So stay with us. We'll be right back. Welcome back to the Money Pros. We're talking real estate now with our real estate pros from Keller Williams Realty. Chad Kritzas, who's a regular on the Money Pros, and a new guest for us, Sam Alpern. They work together, and we're going to be talking about what I think is an interesting topic, FSBO, for sale by owner. We see these signs a lot. And I've never sold a property that way. I've always used a real estate agent, but I see the signs and I'm like, am I missing something? Maybe this is a good idea. So we're going to talk to you guys about that. But as we do, before we jump into the topic at hand, Chad, you're always kind enough to give us an update on what's going on in the real estate market. As far back as I can remember at this point, over the past couple of years, as you've been on the show, things have been pretty good. So as we tape this show, beginning of summer here, how was the first half of 2018 been? What can you tell us about Rhode Island?
Pretty consistent on where we've been the last couple of years while we've been doing the show. I mean, the market's up, single family prices up 9%, quarter over quarter. This is one of the first episodes that we're doing. The sale numbers on single family homes are actually down. So we've been talking about lack of inventory, lack of homes coming on the market. So less homes are closing because there's less homes for sale. And that's been pretty, last 6-12 months or 6-9 months, that's been pretty consistent. Multifamilies, quarter over quarter, the prices are up 25%, which is huge. We're seeing a lot of investors, previous investors selling and get rid of it. And some of the prices on the multifamilies, even in Newport, I mean, they're excessive right now. Sales only up 3%, same thing, lack of inventory. And then condos are pretty consistent. They've been up 7% on sales and price. So they've been climbing pretty steadily over the last 6-12 months.
Is a lack of inventory, particularly in the single-family home market, as a result to some extent of such a hot market? The people that have sold have sort of done so, and it's, I don't know, are you surprised that there's low inventory, or is this sort of the nature of the cyclical real estate market?
Well, we're starting to see, the last month or so, we're starting to see inventory kind of spike back up, which is
seasonal to some extent? Or?
Seasonal, but also you got to remember, real estate is a 60 or 90 or 180-day business. So more listings coming on this month, that's not going to increase sales stats for 2 to 3 months from now.
Right.
So our last episode, we were talking about the lack of homes for sale. That is what's affecting this quarter's numbers because, it takes, say, a quarter to sell the property.
So things are remain strong, I think, it's still a seller's market. So I guess that's encouraging if you're trying to sell a house, and if you're trying to buy one, you're probably going through some frustrations.
Like everything, it's all about timing.
And I think that is a good segue into the topic we want to talk to you guys about, which is the idea of a for sale by owner. It is a seller's market. I think Absolutely. It is tempting for people to say, you know what, properties are flying off the shelf. Right. Do I really need a professional real estate agent to help me with the sales? So let's talk about some of the areas where people that decide or are considering for sale by owner can get themselves into trouble. And Sam, the first one I want to ask you about is you got to put a price tag on this thing. Mm-hmm. You got to figure out how much you're going to sell it for. Amateurs, I imagine they go online, they use Zillow, whatever it is. What are some of the pitfalls to setting your own price here?
So when you set a price for a home, real estate, it's really three things. It's the price, the condition, and the location. A lot of that, it's common sense. You know if your home's outdated. But when it comes to the price, you really want to make sure that you're looking at the comps. An appraiser is going to look back the last 6 months. They're going to look at the last 180 days. You need to justify the price that you're selling the home for. Even if you price a home astronomically, someone gives you the offer. If they have any financing, the bank is still going to have the appraisal. So you need to be able to justify with the comps that price is accurate. That home is justified at that price. So really, when you're coming up with a price point, you need to be realistic. You also need to be reasonable, and you need to make sure at the same time that you're maximizing your investment. You don't want to have your home price so low that everybody's coming, but everyone's going to get it as a steal at the end of the day. Even if some offers go against each other, they're still getting it well below market value.
I guess there's a couple of dangers. I mean, one is you price it too low and you leave money on the table because you're just simply not aware of the value or how to evaluate it. And I could imagine on the flip side, people having a sort of delusional view of what their house might actually be worth. I mean, because they love it that much, but you know the rest of the world may not feel the same way, right?
Of course, and you know a lot of people in general, especially for sale by owners, at least from what I've seen, they look at these automated property evaluations, you know, and they start to take that as gold. You know, they say it says 300 on there, so they
that
think,
must be it.
Yeah, my home's worth 300. But you have to remember, they've never been in your home. You know, your roof can be caving in. You could have just put in a new bathroom, a new bedroom, new kitchen.
And it's not just the data, it's the interpretation of the data, right? You might have the information, but you have to know how to look into it. Chad, let me ask you, you know, in my business, time is money, right?
Absolutely.
And I bet you feel the same way. Do people underestimate the amount of time that it takes to take a house from getting ready to list all the way through to the closing? I mean, there's a lot of stuff that happens in there. It's easy to underestimate the time. What can you tell us about that?
Well, I mean, you just said it yourself. I mean, you work a full-time job, right? So do you want to come home at 5 or 6 o'clock when you want to see your family and then start cleaning for your evening showings? Or, you know, I know you're a boat guy, so maybe you're not going to go out on your boat this weekend. It's only going to be 80 and beautiful, but you're going to sit home and do your open house.
Right.
Right. So there's a lot of time that goes into it. Your average house doesn't sell in one day either. Right, so you're thinking 60, 90 days to sell this house. You have 60, 90 days of showings, open houses. Then you get into once they're pending, I mean, then you have the home inspection. So now you're taking a half day out of work to sit there with a home inspector. You have your bank appraiser, so now you get a couple more hours out of work. So it's a very time-consuming process. I mean, that's why, you know, we're 365 days a year, 7 days a week. I mean, there isn't a day we don't work.
Right.
You know, we do showings on Christmas Eve and New Year's. I mean, we're out there.
So it's a huge amount of time, but you also said something that I hadn't really thought about. It's like doing your own open house. I cannot imagine a more uncomfortable scenario in my, you know, in my worldview of sitting in my house waiting for strangers to come by and poke through my underwear drawer. And that leads me to my next question, which is, how do you not get? I would be my own worst salesman if strangers were coming by my house, even if I was trying to, you know, actively trying to sell my house. How do you deal with the emotion? Like, is that a problem that people that are trying to sell their own house can run into?
So even if subconsciously you're making every effort not to show the emotion, it's going to come out. We're human. It's going to happen. So, you know, I just want to bring up two things that we've seen quite often. One, you know, I've had several situations of for sale by owner during the inspections. They start arguing with the inspector. You know, the sink in the bathroom is dripping. You know, there's a little leak, and they start saying to the inspector, you know, no, that's not an issue. It's been like that the last 15 years.
Right.
You know, it hasn't worsened. It's not an issue. But to a buyer, you know, we pay home inspectors for a reason. We want to make sure that, you know, anything that could be an issue we're knowing about. Mm-hmm. You know, so that, you know, like you said, it being your own worst salesman, even if that's not a deal breaker, it's something that can make a very uncomfortable situation for the buyer. Another thing I want to bring up is it actually happened last weekend. I went to a for sale by owner in Warwick, a beautiful house, very savvy couple selling it on their own. You know, doing a pretty strong job, actually, probably one of the best I've seen. But with them, the thing that I really took away at the end of the showing, I was there for about 30 minutes, it wasn't so much the property. You know, it was gorgeous, but it wasn't the property. That's not what I took away. I just thought to myself, you know, I spent 30 minutes. I learned everything about the last 35 years, what happened at this house for this family. You know, I learned about everything because they have emotional attachments to
Christmas
everything.
dinners, and
right? Yeah,
kids
the
coming
dinners,
home,
the parties, even the bush that they planted in the front yard when they first moved in. But as a buyer, you're not walking in and wanting to see their house. You want to walk in and see your house.
Right.
You know, you want everything to be as neutral as possible.
And if they feel like it's just the sellers, they might not feel as inclined to see themselves in the house.
Right. You need to be able to really have your imagination roam and be able to picture yourself, not just for the next 3 days, not for the next 30 minutes during the showing, for the next 30 years. You want to be able to picture what your life is going to look like in that property.
So you have the emotional component, which would definitely be a problem for me, I'm telling you right now. My passive-aggressive nature would come out. I would turn buyers away very rapidly. But there's also some technical, some technical aspects to this. One of the things I'm continually impressed by with certain listings is the level of photography and the videos and the things like that that go along with it. Do you find that owners that are selling their own homes are really in a position to market the property that well? I mean, how important is that whole aspect of the selling process?
Well, we've talked in the past. One of my big pet peeves is even when they're listed for sale and the agent or the owner, they're walking around, they're doing their iPhone photos, right? You're selling a $500,000 house, and you got these grainy, dark photos.
Yeah.
Even some that are taken at night. So, I mean, our photographer's amazing. We have an amazing drone photographer. But then, you got to remember is we also have a large marketing budget. So we're paying all these big search engines to make sure these houses are appearing in the best light possible. Like, for instance, we were meeting this morning. We use a marketing company out of Southern California for higher end properties. They do a lot of Wall Street Journal, New York Times, Robb Report, and access a lot of these things. So, your average homeowner isn't paying the big search engines to highlight their home. I mean, maybe they're sticking it on, let's say, Craigslist or Zillow or one of those things. But if they're only going to that, that buyer's only on that one website, they're missing all the other buyers that are on all the other websites. And all the online marketing we do. For instance, on Fridays, we email out to 9,000 people every Friday afternoon to put that listing in front of the consumer and in front of other agents.
So, as usual, we've run out of time before we've gotten to all the things we wanted to talk to, but it seems like the message here is that, not that for sale by owner is wrong, and obviously as professional real estate agents, you're going to be advocates for using a professional. We usually advocate for professionals here on Money Pros, but just the reality that there's a lot to consider, and you really have to know thyself and consider if you're really going to be able to maximize the value of your real estate. You don't want to be penny wise and pound foolish, as my grandmother would say,
right.
I think, right? All right, guys, thanks for joining us.
Yeah,
Up next, we're going to be talking about getting the heck out of the country, where you might retire if it's not here in the United States. We'll have the top 5 list coming up. Stay with us. Welcome back to the Money Pros. So who among us has not fantasized about retiring, pitching it all, and moving to a foreign country where nobody knows you and you can go about your business in peace and quiet? So most of us retire here in the United States, Arizona, Florida, New Hampshire, wherever it might be. Many people right here in Rhode Island, Massachusetts. But some people think about leaving the country and going someplace more exotic. So this is something we've talked about on the Money Pros before. International Living magazine comes out with what they call the Retirement Living Index. And now this is a magazine that focuses on the idea of people leaving the United States to live elsewhere. We call them expats or expatriates. And they come out with an index every year where they rank countries based on a variety of criteria. So they've been creating this index for 26 years. We've talked about this list before. They update it every year, so they've come out with the 2018 list. And what's interesting about it is they really do a very in-depth job of trying to analyzing. And they use both quantitative metrics. They look at things like cost of living. They look at the cost of health care, climate, the degree to which there's already an expat community in the country or in the places where people would be most likely to retire. So they look at solid numbers, but then they also have a number of correspondents in these countries, people that contribute to the magazine that are retirees themselves, that can actually talk about the community. So it's really a combination of not only quantitative and qualitative information. So if you're interested in more information, I encourage you to Google International Living Retirement Index and read through it, because they give very detailed explanations of why they think a particular place is good and why it's good. So I thought I would just touch on it on today's show and talk about the top 5, and I think the list is at least 10, if not longer, but talk about the top 5 countries. And so as we go through them, I'll try to hit some of the highlights that were notated in the index that they just published. So let's put the slide up and we'll talk about number 1. So number 1 is Malaysia. Now, number 5 is Malaysia. Number 5 on the list, and it's unique in that of the top 5 that we're about to go through, it's the only one that's not in Central or South America. Of course, Malaysia is in Asia, and it's noted for being an easy place to live with not a lot of bureaucracy, English speaking, and obviously language hurdles are an issue for a lot of these countries potentially, and very much a first world country. So if you're worried about a third world type of environment without a lot of modern amenities, Malaysia is not that. It is a first world country with a very cosmopolitan presence. Back to the slide. Number 4, Ecuador. Never would have thought of Ecuador But Central and South American countries are common on the list. Ecuador is noted for being diverse, unhurried, and metropolitan. Number 3 on the list, this is a repeat country, Panama. Panama known for being friendly, welcoming, and interestingly enough, great benefits in terms of health care and other senior benefits that are easy to attain as an expatriate, so there aren't a lot of hurdles. Number 2 on the list, Mexico, convenient, exotic, and the magazine describes it as first world. I suppose that would depend on where in Mexico you were actually retiring, but a broad swath of places you could be, whether it be mountains, coastal, cities, country, etc. And finally, number 1 on the list, which is also a very popular vacation destination, Costa Rica. They describe it as the world's best retirement destination, a beacon for dependability. Costa Rica is not just recently more popular. It's become steadily more popular over many years and has done a great job of enhancing the attractions for foreigners. So a little something to think about as you think about your retirement. All right, up next, we're going to answer a question on CD rates. Stay with us. We'll be right back. Welcome back to the Money Pros. Let's jump right into the viewer question. We got this from Chuck on Facebook. Chuck, thanks for asking the question. I've been seeing CD rates rise nationally. Right here in Rhode Island, banks are offering 3% rates for 24 to 48 months on CDs. How do you see rates climbing this year? Should I commit to 3% now or wait a few months? The dilemma of the CD investor. This is a challenge, and you're absolutely right. Rates have been going up. The Fed has been raising short-term rates. We've seen bond yields rising, and you're seeing it in the CD market. The question is, do you commit now or do you commit later? That's really a difficult question to answer. I would imagine rates are going to continue to rise, but to know what the timing of that's going to be and to know how high they're going to get is almost impossible to say with any degree of certainty. One thing that I would suggest is potentially laddering your CDs to look at 6-month or 1-year CDs, but put your money in increments so that each 6-month period you have money that's renewing and you can renew it at a potentially higher rate. So that's one very brief thought. As always, thanks for asking the question. Thanks for watching the Money Pros. We'll see you again next Sunday right here on the Money Pros. Take care, folks.